Welcome everybody. This is the first public consultation event for the Dundalk RD Flood Relief Scheme. I can see people are joining at the moment, so we are going to give a couple of minutes before we start the presentation. My name is Barry Dunphy. I am project manager for the scheme. I work with Nicholas O'Dwyer's, and I'm joined here by Jamie Reynolds, who's project manager with Binny's, who's currently working on the scheme as well. So you will have seen in the chat there's information if anyone's having any audio issues, just follow some of the advice that's there, and we'll give you a couple of minutes and then we'll start the presentation. Okay, I think guys we'll kick off now and we'll go through the presentation. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping when we start that, but we'll come to that in a minute. So welcome everyone to the public consultation event for the Dundalk RD Flood Relief Scheme. This is brought to you by Louth County Council in association with the OPW and Nicholas O'Dwyer and Binny's as the consultants for the scheme. Jamie, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll just do a bit of housekeeping on the presentation. So during the webinar, all attendees' microphones are automatically muted for the entire webinar. During the presentation, you can post questions online and there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So questions can be asked during the presentation or at the end, but they won't really be answered by ourselves until the very end. We'll complete the presentation first. We'll get through as many questions as we possibly can. And in the event that they're not answered tonight due to time constraints or whatever, they will be answered and they will be placed on the website. So don't worry about if your question isn't got today. So first of all, just a little bit of a background to the scheme. The Dundalk, Blackrock and RD areas were identified as areas for further assessment in the Northwest Catchment Flood Risk Assessment and Management, or CFRAM study, by the OPW and Louth County Council. Binny's and Nicholas O'Dwyer joint venture were then appointed in August 2020 to provide engineering and environmental services for the Dundalk and RD scheme. To the right here, you can see the outline scheme programme. Okay, so that's over 5 stages of the scheme, and the activity commenced in August 2020, which we've shown here, and we completed certain elements of the scheme. It will continue through to the development of the scheme, on to the planning process to get the scheme approved through the consenting mechanism, detailed design, construction and handover. And you can see the construction period itself is over 3 years, and the current programme, it's estimated that the scheme is likely to be in place, as in the flood relief defences will be in place by the end of 2026. Okay, Jamie, you can have another slide, thanks. Just who we are, we're a joint venture. Binny's are a 100-year-old brand that were relaunched in 2021. They were previously went under the name of Back and Beach. We have 1,200 employees globally. They're part of the RSK group since January 2021. Nicholas O'Dwyer were founded in 1932 in Ireland. We have over 200 staff here. Our headquarters are in Dublin. We also have offices in Newry, Birmingham, Tanzania and Zambia. And we joined the RSK group in March 2020. Both Binny's and Nicholas O'Dwyer have been working on flood relief schemes for the OPW and local authorities here in Ireland since 2014. And in the management team, the project directors are Kevin Simpson with Binny's, Fabio Scaliviero with Binny's, Jim Oliver, Nicholas O'Dwyer, myself, Barry Dunphy, project manager with Nicholas O'Dwyer, Justin Hughes, an assistant project manager with Nicholas O'Dwyer, and Jamie Reynolds also joining us here, assistant project manager with Binny's. So as I mentioned in the second slide, there are 5 stages to a flood relief scheme. We're currently in stage 1, and this is the options assessment and scheme development. And the elements involved in the options assessment are topographic and CCTV surveys, which you may have seen out and around Dundalk and in RD, and they're now completed. There's the hydrological analysis, which is also completed, and we're currently working on the hydraulic modelling to determine the extent of the flood risk and the type of defences that may be required. In tandem with that, we have the environmental surveys and assessments, and they're currently in progress. But following these elements, then we have an options and scheme development, and that's due to commence once we've finalised our hydraulic modelling and the elements of the environmental surveys and constraints. Once stage one is complete, we move to the planning stage, and that's where we follow the consenting mechanism either through the local authority or through An Bord Pleanála to get consent to bring the scheme through to construction. Stage 3 then is the detailed construction design, and then we tender out to procure a contractor to carry out the works. Following that, then we have the construction stage where the works are implemented, and finally then we have the handover where the works are reviewed and operation and maintenance schemes put into place, and then this is handed over to Louth County Council for the operation of the scheme into the future. Just to identify the two particular areas of the scheme, we have Dundalk, down from the estuary down as far as Blackrock, and then we have RD itself. These are the areas that were identified as AFAs as part of the CFRAM study, which are now being brought forward to this scheme. So now I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Jamie Reynolds, and he'll go into a little bit more detail on the elements that have been completed to date and what we're hoping to do in the near and medium future. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Barry. So as you can see, this is an example of the topography and the modelled watercourses in Dundalk. You can see the areas in red are the higher land, and the areas in blue are the low-lying areas. So you can see Dundalk is quite a low-lying area susceptible to potential coastal flooding. In terms of the watercourses that were modelled as part of CFRAMs, they didn't look at watercourses with a catchment of less than 1 kilometre squared. As part of this study, we are including those. So this time round, for example, the watercourse alongside Clonagales and Ardesmond is included in yellow there, and also around Hardy's Lane and the Lokers, the watercourses in those areas are now included in the analysis. In terms of RD has the higher land to the north and south, with the Dee Valley through the centre. Flooding in RD seems to be coming particularly from the tributaries to the south around Rathgorey and Mullameelin. Dundalk and Blackrock, identified in CFRAMs, there was approximately 1,900 properties at risk. Of those, 176 were commercial or industrial, and the remaining 1,700 were residential homes. The goal of this scheme is to protect from a 1% annual exceedance probability of a fluvial or river flood and a 0.5% coastal risk of flooding. The whole life cost of the scheme is estimated to be 70 and 80 million. The scheme will be designed to be sustainable and adaptable to climate change, and also will incorporate public realm enhancements of the scheme itself. So I'll go into those in a bit more detail in a moment. As we know, Dundalk is the county town of Louth. It has a population of sitting about 39,000, making it the 8th largest urban area in Ireland. RD is a historic medieval town with a population of around 5,000. There's very diverse areas in Dundalk and RD that we're dealing with as part of this scheme. As we can see here, we've got the hard defences of Dundalk, Blackrock Promenade, as seen here in a storm in January 2020. We then have large areas of salt marsh and existing embankments, some with watercourses right up against them. We're also dealing with kind of urban flooding from rainfall and the rivers itself, this being Fairgreen Road, with some slight flooding recently. Along the Castletown River, we're dealing with a large river that's heavily tidally influenced. There's some existing embankments along the Castletown River that are also being looked at as part of the scheme too. We then have the Navy Bank and the areas reclaimed behind it, and again the Lord Limerick and South Marsh embankment, and the areas protected and drained behind those. As I mentioned, as part of the Dundalk section of the scheme, there's an integrated greenway, which is potentially about 25 kilometres, be going along the coast and also along the Castletown River. This ultimately will form part of the Great Eastern Greenway, which is the government's goal to connect Dublin to Belfast using a designated greenway. You can see there's some illustrations there on the right of what this may look like in future. We're also involved with a consultant called Nicholas de Young Associates, who did the Market Square in Dundalk a number of years ago. So they're involved in the public realm and greenway enhancements as part of this scheme. In RD, we're dealing with two diverse areas. We've got the main Dee River, which is a large fluvial river, and also then the number of tributaries, a lot of which have been heavily adjusted and constructed over the years. So it's dealing with the flows through those and also the culverts through RD as well. To give a bit of context, so these are the flood extents as predicted as part of the CFRAM scheme. So in dark green is the 10%, the middling green is the 0.5%, and the light green is the 0.1% coastal flooding. And then in blue is and pink is the river flooding predicting. So you can see Dundalk is dominated by coastal flood risk, in particular those low-lying areas I mentioned previously. CFRAM's proposed a number of defences, mostly hard defences along the coast and a few on the tributaries coming through Dundalk itself. As part of this scheme, we're re-looking at this really from back to basics, looking at the hydrology and then much more detailed hydraulic modelling, and then on to options design and assessment. But this is just for a bit of context what the CFRAMs were proposing. In RD, as I mentioned, in the actual scheme area, the flooding is dominated by the tributaries to the south. And in CFRAMs, they were proposing hard defences, walls or embankments along those watercourses just to keep the flow in channel. In terms of works completed to date, so as Barry touched on, we've completed defence asset condition surveys of all existing defences, so the Lord Limerick embankments, for example, in Navy Bank in Dundalk. We've carried out topographical surveys of over 890 hectares, and approximately just under 6,000 properties were surveyed. We got 5.3 kilometres of channels and 48 kilometres of bridges and 5 kilometres of flood embankments, all resurveyed to millimetre accuracy to feed into our models. You can see, for example, in RD, this is an extract from one of those surveys, giving a high level of detail in that area to the south. We've also carried out CCTV and manhole surveys along 740 metres in culverts in RD and 5.3 kilometres of culverts in Dundalk. There's also been an exercise carried out on the initial greenway route constraints mapping, looking at potential routes and potential issues that may be encountered along the greenway. This will then form part of the scheme design and options appraisal, because the greenway is really going to be an integrated part of the scheme in Dundalk. On the hydrology side of things, we've re-looked at all historic flood data and hydrometric and meteorological data up to 2021. So the images on the right, you can see are rainfall stations. The red ones are currently live and the blue ones are historic data. All of that has been taken up to 2021 to really get the most up-to-date picture. And the bottom image shows flow gauges. So these are level and water flow rate gauges in the surrounding area. All of these were incorporated as well. The graph shows an example of how we interpolate these actual real readings projecting forward into flood events, and how that compares to previous levels. On the hydraulic side of things, so we're progressing with the detailed hydraulic modelling with that latest survey information. As part of the modelling is what's called joint probability analysis. So it really looks at the combination of coastal events with river events and rainfall events, and comes up with a realistic combination and joint likelihood of these. We're also looking at climate change scenarios and sea level rise and rainfall increases for the flood defences as well. There's an exercise for wave overtopping analysis along the full coastline. So the two images at the top are an extract from the guidance document on that. So we really look at the detail of how waves affect different areas. So, for example, waves perform much more differently on the Blackrock Promenade compared to the Salt Marsh and embankments. So we really look at these at quite regular intervals along it to feed into the modelling. Something that's looked at as part of the scheme, which wasn't looked at in CFRAMS, is the natural water retention measures. So that's really looking at a catchment level, ways to reduce river flooding, and looking at potential for floodplain storage, runoff reduction, and sediment management. So we're currently producing similar maps to the one there on the left, which shows the likelihood for interventions in areas at a more natural level. On the environmental side of things, then, we have completed a number of baseline surveys, such as wintering birds and migratory birds in Dundalk. We also are underway with bat and habitat surveys, fish, otter, badger, and invasive species surveys, all in Dundalk and RD. These are all forming part of the constraint study, which will help feed into the design of the option. We also have a landscape and visual impact assessment that is underway for the scheme in Dundalk and RD. The images on the right give just an example of the environmental designations, such as special areas of conservation or special protection areas, or the red and blue dots are National Inventory of Architectural Heritage Properties or Recorded Monuments zones. So there are a lot of constraints that are all being taken on board as part of this scheme. The next steps is really continuing with the detailed hydraulic modelling, and as Barry said, this will lead into the options assessment and scheme development. So as part of the options assessment, we will come up with multiple options to prevent the flooding. These will then be ranked and scored from a number of criteria called a multi-criteria analysis, looking at it from an environmental, social, economic, adaptability point of view, to really recommend a preferred option, which will then be presented again through public consultation, and then we'll take forward to scheme development. In parallel with that are the required environmental assessments. So we got appropriate assessments, NIS, and EIAORs as well. Really, this presentation is about public and stakeholder engagement, though. So on the project, we have a dedicated project website, which is floodinfo.ie/Dundalk FRS. So that has up-to-date information about the scheme. We have a dedicated project email address, which is dundalkrdfrs@binnies.com, which you can email at any time to contact the team. There's a briefing note that is sent to elected members, and also a public newsletter sent as well. We have a postal address if anyone wishes to contact us via that method as well. We're happy to engage using that. In terms of consultation day, so this is the initial consultation day, which we gave this presentation to elected members on the 8th of September, and now to yourselves on the 6th of October today. There will be another public consultation day once the emerging options are coming out, and that's scheduled for approximately spring 2022. As part of this presentation and consultation, you may have seen in the Dundalk and RD libraries and the Dundalk Town Hall, County Hall and RD civic offices, there are leaflets available. This is just an extract from it here. This gives a bit more information about the scheme, summarises and has our contact details if you wish to get in touch. There was newspaper ads in the Democrat, the Argus and the Leader, directing people to this public consultation, and also with our contact details. And also these posters are up in the libraries and council offices. Accompanying these are a questionnaire, and really that's the key part of this stage, is to get feedback and information from stakeholders and public. So there's hard copy questionnaires in the libraries and council offices with stamped address envelopes if you wish to contact us that way, or there is an interactive, the same questionnaire just online, which is available on our website. And you can click on that and fill that out whenever suits. So really that brings us to the end of the presentation. If you have any questions at all, please type them in the chat and we will get to them now. And if there's any further questions after this presentation, please feel free to email us at dundalkrdfrs@binnies.com and we'll come back to you later. So I think we're going to turn on our webcams now, the project team, and we're happy to answer questions as they come in the chat now. So thank you. So Barry, you were looking at the questions there, Joe?
Yep. Thanks very much for that, Jamie. Okay. Okay, I'll just look at the questions here. The first question here, are there plans to treat invasive species when they are found? So I think just, Jamie, just maybe to jump in with you there on that one. I think there is an invasive species management plan being prepared as part of the scheme. Obviously, to identify areas where there is invasive species, where there is likely to be works carried out. So once that's identified, and if we identify works are being carried out in the vicinity there, then they will require treatment.
Exactly. Yep. So there's been an initial invasive species survey carried out, and there's a more detailed one underway in the coming weeks and months to really form part of and understand what management may be required and feed into the option development as well.
Okay. Will you share detail on your baseline surveys when completed regarding migratory birds, etc.? Basically, the environmental surveys, when they are complete, will form part of the environmental response documents, be it an environmental impact assessment report or an AA screening report, and those documents will form part of the planning documents and will be available as part of the scheme documents. So when they are completed and approved by the OPW and Louth County Council, those documents will be shared within the website, and it will be part of the planning documentation. Okay. Will the design be sustainable and adaptable to higher sea level predictions into the future? Can the fences be raised if need be, and if current sea level predictions are conservative? Jim, you might be able to take that one.
Yeah, so climate change adaptability does form part of both. Sorry, the design of the scheme does take into account climate change as part of the actual design of it, but then also as part of the options assessment and really coming up with the preferred option. Adaptability to climate change and higher sea levels or higher rainfall events does form part of the scoring and the ranking and recommendation of the preferred option. So an option that is more easily adaptable will score higher in that category, for example, and will form part of the assessment there. So, Paddy, yeah.
Yeah, if I may add as well, just to let Brian know that also as part of the project, it's required that we have to prepare a climate change adaptation plan, which will show how the climate change adaptation was included in the option assessment, and it goes further to identify trigger points where climate change trigger points where once these trigger points are achieved, that we would have to review the design in future. So, and that will be the document will be completed, will be available to everybody after the project, which reflects both, as I say, the options and future proposals for climate change trigger points.
Okay. So Jamie, this one is for you. Can I ask if Dundalk County Council has been included in research to date, their experience of the 6 to 7 major fluvial flooding incidents over the past 30 years?
Yeah, I think Paddy wanted to jump in on that. Did you, Paddy?
Yeah, Paddy, you want to?
Yeah, well, myself and Jareth and other staff members in Louth County Council are involved in the project management scheme, and personally I've been working in the flood area in Louth for the last 10 years, so I'm familiar with the flood events in those periods. We've also got all the available records for previous flood events which have been passed on to the design team, so I suppose the answer to that is yes.
Yes, exactly. And these past flood events, any records or information that we've received do form part of the kind of validation of the models, and really make sure it's predicting the realistic picture of what's happening. That said, if there are any records, if people has any records of flooding in the area, we're very happy to get them sent in. Please fill them in, email them to the project email address. Any photos, information of past floods, it all forms part of the picture and really the validation of the model and the design of the scheme. So thanks.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. Will you share imagery detail of the proposed walkway from the Navy Bank to Dundalk?
So the imagery is still kind of work in progress at the moment, but as it is more finalized, it will be shared through the website as well and shared with the public. And also as the greenway design and the public realm enhancements form part of the options, that will be presented as part of our options presentation in the spring of 22. So there'll be a lot more detail at that stage.
Okay. Yeah, and I think basically there'll be a public consultation, as Jamie mentioned in the presentation next spring. So elements like that will form part of that presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Is the River Flurry catchment part of the flood relief scheme?
So, who wants to take this? Or,
Well, you go ahead, Jimmy.
you know, so the scheme boundary is currently from the top of the inlet at the kind of Ballymascanlon services there, round the River Fane to the south. So that's the north and south scheme boundaries of the project, and all the watercourses in that area are being included. So further outside of that doesn't form part of the scheme at this time. Okay, thanks, Jamie. Can you identify which streets or areas in Dundalk are most affected by flooding? Well, that's what we're in the process of doing at the moment. So when we have finished the hydraulic modelling, then we'll be able to prepare the flood maps, and the flood maps will identify the depth and the extent of flooding, both from coastal and from fluvial within the Dundalk and the RD area. So at the moment, what you have on CFRAM is a very high level study, and that level of mapping is going to be updated with the more detailed study that we're carrying out at the moment. Again, that will be clear in the scheme that will be presented next year, and it will show what areas are at risk, and then what work will be done to alleviate that risk. Yeah, if people are interested in the CFRAM study and the previous mapping, the floodinfo.ie website that the OPW host has a lot of background information and has the high-level flood maps, as Barry said, and as I was showing earlier, which are available publicly to look at this stage until the more detailed ones come out next year. Okay. Are there any short-term mitigation plans being considered with respect to surface water disposal in Dundalk, with substantial spot flooding due to blocked road gullies in many areas after relatively normal rainfall levels? So any major flooding event between now and the project completion are a major concern for residents. So,
there, Barry, just to say,
yes,
we do have a scheme underway, called the Town Parks Flood Relief Scheme. It's taking place in an area called Balmer's Bog here in Dundalk. So it's between the Hill Street Bridge and the back of Hughes' Park. So it's designed to alleviate some of the flooding that has happened previously over on the RD Road and the Mount Hamilton area. So that is currently underway and is hopefully due for completion in the next 4 or 5 months or so, complete by the end of the year. As regards Black Road Gullies, I suppose maybe that's slightly different question, but if that person who asked the question has specific areas where he feels that there may be black gullies, if he wants to email in or type in the chat box there, we can refer those black gullies to the operations section of Louth County Council.
Thanks, Charlotte. Okay, has the team encountered any resistance to natural floodplain management? Will these methods be introduced as a genuine tactic to reduce flooding events? Yes, they're very important. It is natural floodplain management, particularly in the upper catchments for rivers, is genuinely going to be considered. It's part of all OPW schemes now. It is much more climate resilient than just hard defences. So it's definitely something that we are going to be looking at. It's a case of what is effective, what will work, what works with some catchments may not work with other catchments, or simply there isn't the space either in terms of the urban space, or there isn't available space to give the complete benefit to the flood relief scheme. But we have been involved on other projects where we have used natural floodplain management, and it is something that we do consider genuinely. Okay, do you have estimates of how high the flood defences will need to be? But as per a previous question, I think when the flood mapping is complete from the hydraulic assessments, then we will have an idea of the extent of both the coastal flooding and the extent of the fluvial flooding, including wave overtopping for coastal. So that then will give us an idea of what, in terms of a direct defence, what type of what heights would be required based on what we've analysed. Okay, where do the panel stand on new developments planned for floodplain areas in Dundalk?
If I could take that, Barry.
Thanks.
While we're not going to comment this evening on specific developments or specific planning applications, I would say that any planning application that Louth County Council received are now reviewed and have been for a number of years, and to comply with the flooding guidelines issued by the Department of Environment.
Thanks, Paddy. Okay, question here. Does groundwater flooding factor into the modelling? We have several months of it in our area every winter. Groundwater is being considered. I think, Jamie, you're saying there?
Yeah, no, I just, well, yeah, groundwater is being considered as a flooding mechanism and is being looked at in the area. If the asker has specific areas that they say flood several months every winter, if they could pass that on, we'd be very keen to know about that as well. But yeah, no, from a modelling and design point of view, groundwater is being looked at in addition to river rainfall and coastal flooding as well.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. As I say, at this stage, the public consultation, we're looking for information from the public as we analyse the scheme. So any information that you do have, please send it on to us. Okay, Jarlath, this is a question for you. In relation to the current Balmer's Bog project, is a pumping station included in the works, or will it be a gravity feed to the Tesco pipe?
The short answer, Barry, is that it's 100% is a gravity feed the whole way. It's 400 metres of pipeline connected into the existing 1350 that's there, so it's a gravity feed the whole way.
That's great, Jarlath. Thanks, Emil.
If I could just add that we are also constructing an inlet chamber at the head of the pipeline with an adjustable weir, which will give us the ability to adjust the level of the flow into the pipe. Plan being that Balmer's Bog is basically a massive storage area for the southwest sector of Dundalk, and that we can reduce the water level in Balmer's Bog prior to some forecast heavy rain, periods of heavy rain, to increase the storage available and hopefully reduce the flooding.
Thanks, Paddy. Okay. So if there are any more questions? If there's no more questions, do you want to leave it there, or is everybody okay? And as we said earlier, this has been recorded. This will be available, so you can look at the presentation again, and all the questions will be answered. And any other questions you feel you want to ask, the questionnaire sheet that Jamie mentioned is going to be available, and we look forward to hearing from you, because it's as I say, we need to know from yourselves your experiences. I think it's very important at this stage, as the scheme has begun, that we get your input, that we get the best scheme available.
Can I also add that, just to reiterate what Jamie said earlier, but the questionnaire being available. The questionnaire is available online on the website, but also for people who've probably not as computer literate, or may not have computer available to them, there's hard copies of the questionnaires available at Dundalk and RD libraries, in Dundalk Town Hall, County Hall in Dundalk, and in the council offices in RD. And you can just go in and collect and fill it in and send it in to us, please.
Yeah, there are stamped address envelopes with them if you request those as well. They're there to send in to us for free. Yeah.
Free.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Okay, thanks everybody for attending and for the questions, and for your time. And we'll obviously sharing all the information as it comes in, and look forward to working further on this scheme.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.